meeting. We've called this meeting because we have great anticipation and curiosity about what's happening with the Central Vista, and the plans have been solved and been sorted out and have now been presented to the public. And today we've invited HCP, Mr. Bimal Patel, head of HCP, to come and explain the design to us. There's a lot of curiosity about this subject, and we hope that this meeting will help the Delhi landscape architects understand what's planned for the Central Vista. It's a space that's really important to us in Delhi, to all the Delhi residents, and of course, landscape architects in Delhi are very interested in this subject. In terms of questions, what we'll do, they have a presentation for about 45 minutes. Please, you can type in your questions as you go along. And then I will read out the questions at the end rather than people ask their questions. I'll ask them for you. If there are any duplicate questions, I won't ask the question twice, of course. So please go ahead, and as you go through the presentation, you can type in your questions, and we will, in the interest of keeping it brief, we keep your questions short, and Mr. Bimal Patel will then answer them as we go along. So we can get started now. Welcome, Mr. Patel, and thank you for making the time to come and join us.
Thank you very much. Can I be heard?
You heard very clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for organizing this event. I think it's most useful and most appropriate. And thanks a lot for taking the initiative to organize it and the effort to organize it. I am going to first present our team and then the presentation after that. If you do not, Niyati, can you please just share the first slide of the presentation, please? So I'd like to, here's all the people involved in the project, at least so far as the Central Vista Avenue portion is concerned. We have the project, of course, as you know, is led by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The Minister, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, is involved in it. The Secretary, Mr. T.S. Mishra, and the Joint Secretary, D. Thara, are both very actively leading the project. They are the clients, at least the anchor people for the client. Mr. Amit Kataria, Ritu Sen, and Sunit Mehta are other officers involved from the ministry. Our primary contract is with CPWD, and we have the Director General of CPWD, Mr. Jaiswal, and the Additional Director General, Mr. Chauhan, are key figures there, and Senior Architect Mr. Vijay Rao is also very important to the project. I have the privilege of leading a terrific team of people that I work with, and some of the key names in that, at least in this portion of the project that we are looking at, is Mr. Deepak Kotecha, Pradeep Jadhav, Nikki Shah, Niyati Manari, and scores of other people who are working on it. We are also privileged, HCP is very privileged to work with a bunch of fantastic consultants. In this case, in this particular aspect of the project, we are very privileged to be working with Mr. Mohammad Shair's office, and Mr. Yogesh Kapoor is right here. He's going to be part of this group. We are also working, an expert who is advising us on the Central Vista Avenue portion of the project is Mr. Pradeep Krishan, who needs no introduction in Delhi, and he is helping us with the landscape portion. There is also Dr. Rao from Bangalore, who is also a landscape architect working along with us. So we have Shair Associates, Pradeep Krishan, and Dr. Rao, all of them from as part of our consultants. Otherwise, I basically have the privilege of leading this fantastic team of people who's putting things together. Today's presentation is going to be done by Niyati Manari. She's an urban designer who's working along with us. And as I see on the screen here, right next to her is Yogesh Kapoor. Niyati, will you take it from here and explain to us, explain to the whole group the design for the Central Vista Avenue? Just before you start, to be able to distinguish things clearly, we say the Central Vista is the Central Vista as a whole, which includes Rashtrapati Bhavan to India Gate and all the buildings, etc. And for the central landscape portion on both sides of Rajpath, we are referring to it as the Central Vista Avenue. This is just to make terminology clear. And Niyati, please take it from there. Aditya, is that okay if we go ahead now?
Absolutely. Please go ahead. And, just take your time as you need to. It's for you to just explain it as you need.
Niyati, please go ahead and let's get going on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, at least to me.
Yes, you're very
you are.
audible. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so within the Central Vista Avenue, I'll be taking you through these three basic structure of the presentation. So we'll be starting with Central Vista Avenue before independence, after independence, and then coming to the proposal. Now, before independence, now this is one of the sketches as imagined by Lutyens. This is what he imagined Central Vista Avenue to be. A very clear area of trees, and the landscape portion is evidently seen here as to what the pattern of trees he had imagined. Even the Vijay Chalk is pretty evident from this particular image. A few photographic images are also available to understand what exactly this space used to look like before independence. So this is one beautiful image from 1936, where actually it's pretty clear as to the non-existence of the Bajri paths and the chain bollards at that time. So the lawns basically extended all the way up to Rajpath, as it is evident from this image. And then what we presume to be a single axis in Central Vista Avenue was actually three axes. So you basically have the central axis with reference to the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and then you have the North Canal and South Canal axis with reference to the North and South block respectively. So this is how the Central Vista Avenue in terms of broad guidelines or axes was designed and developed. So when we reconstruct what was there just before independence, this is how the space was, and this is how the axes were. So now what exactly happened after independence to Central Vista Avenue? The three axes still hold a lot of significance, but there are a couple of additions that happened over a period of 70 years, major additions that I would say. So we see the Rafi Ahmad Marg that came up later, the metro stations that are pretty recent additions to this place. But then there were also these toilet blocks that we see near Vijay Chowk. And then at the far end, we also have the National War Memorial that we see. So all said and done, all of these great additions to this place, but still this holds to be a very great icon to the Indian Republic, and still a very great tourist attraction for Delhi and at a national level, a precious garden, civic garden for the residents of Delhi. However, having said all of that, the avenue currently is under much stress, lacks amenities, and is in a state of disrepair. So let's come down to the proposal. Now, for the proposal, these are the 6 objectives that we laid out. We would refurbish, strengthen, and restore its landscape, provide amenities, make it more pedestrian friendly, provide space and facilities for vendors, ensure the arrangement for national events, and ensure the integrity and continuity of the avenue's original design. So this is what Central Vista Avenue is today. So we have Vijay Chowk on one end, India Gate on the other. We have Rajpath in the center, flanked by lawns and canals on both ends, and some underutilized areas behind the canal. Let's go through each of these layers that we are talking about, one after the other. So this is the entire project boundary. We have Rajpath, as you can see in pink. We have the canals and the fountains at Vijay Chowk. We have the historic elements majorly near Vijay Chowk, but of course we have the India Gate on the other end. We have the axes, the primary and secondary roads, the parking areas, which are completely landscaped areas, paths and plazas along Rajpath, paths and plazas elsewhere in the entire spread, underpasses at 2 areas, amenities and vending zones, grass mounds and step plazas, residential dais for the Republic Day parade. We have lawns, the existing trees, and the proposed trees. So when we put all of this together, this is what we get. So this is the overall master plan for the Central Vista Avenue as it is going to be proposed. And these are all the components that fall into it. Now, when we look at the section, this is how the whole space would look like. We have the Central Secretariat campuses on both ends, Rajpath in the center. We can see the Rashtrapati Bhavan and North South block in the backdrop. We have lawns on both ends, canals, the lawns for with parking provisions on the other side, and so on. So for better understanding of this entire project, we have divided into these three main zones: the Vijay Chowk precinct, the typical avenue, and the India Gate precinct. And these are the 6 topics that I would like to cover in this presentation. So we'll start with the Central Vista Avenue. Now, within the Central Vista Avenue, or the typical avenue, as I'm calling it right now, are these components that I will take you through one after the other. So we start with the basic land use. So the land use, overall land use of the space looks something like this, with these underutilized areas behind the canals, which we don't see from the main photographs or the forefront of the entire avenue. So this is how the area looks like. So some of the avenue is very well landscaped, but it lacks the luster throughout the year. So the same space during many parts of the year looks something like this. The lawns between the rows of trees is unable to grow due to the additional row of planting that happened after independence, or rather after the Lutyens' plans. So this is how the whole space is pretty barren, and the landscape is pretty tired. And there are many other areas behind the canal, as I already mentioned, are pretty underutilized and poorly maintained. So all in all, the land use today has around 17% of underutilized areas, the ones behind the canal. And all of this would be appropriately landscaped and well utilized in the master plan. Now coming to Rajpath. And now when I'm talking about the next segments, I'll just zoom in to this particular red box that you see here to have a better understanding of what exactly we are trying to do and what is the whole intent. So now this is a daily picture of Rajpath, and as you can see, walking along this space is pretty uncomfortable. The edges which are supposed to be for walking is basically occupied either by vendors or for parking, and as you can see, people have to eventually end up walking on the road. So the avenue, the Rajpath portion that we see in the avenue today is something like this. And what we intend to do is to have paved walkways along its edges. So the Rajpath you see today is with these loose bajri edges along its edges. And this is what we intend to do. So we have red granite walkways. We have the bollards, light poles, signages, etc. that will come up on the on one of the edges. And then you have the water channels for drainage from the lawns, especially. Now the Rajpath lawns. So the lawns are actually worn out by the pedestrian traffic. They lack modern water saving infrastructure for watering. Their surface slopes are inadequate, and they are heavily disrupted during the Republic Day parade arrangements, which lasts almost a quarter of the year. So Rajpath lawns that you see today, something spread across something like this. And what we intend to do is to have it well laid out, cover a larger area than present, and to make it a little more convivial for pedestrian usage. So we add a couple of walkways along its edges, as well as a few perpendicular ones. So refurbishment along with these walkways would eventually liven up the space. So the lawns that we see to be like this today would eventually be like this. So we have well irrigated lawns. The species of the lawns would be selected which use much less water. And then the perpendicular walkways would be present at some locations. And then we have the water channels for stormwater drainage, as I mentioned earlier. Now talking about the canals. Now these are very, very much used for boating at particular areas along the entire stretch. They're used for swimming during the summer, but unfortunately they are difficult to maintain. They have some inaccessible edges. The water is unhygienic. They have these makeshift bridges which are put up temporarily for the Republic Day parade. They lack a reliable source of water, so it is dry quite a few times of the year. And then this tree plantations and a lot of other things which don't allow you to promenade along this beautiful water feature very easily. These makeshift bridges, as most of you know, they are done for the Republic Day parade, and this high number is right behind the VIP and VVIP seating enclosures. So you suddenly see like a huge number of temporary bridges that are put up. So the avenues, canals are actually very important features, but they are poorly maintained and not easily accessible. So what we intend to do is to have refurbished canals with walkways along them and bridges at close intervals. Now these bridges would also have a dual purpose. They'll be used during the Republic Day parade celebrations as well. Now we also have a green buffer here. I'll come to it in the 3D visualization. So this is the area in reference. So this is the canal on your extreme right in the image. The underutilized area beyond the canal is what you see here. And then this is what we are proposing. So the refurbished canals would look something like this. We have a green buffer here. It is keeping the existing trees in mind. We would like to have minimum transplantations of trees because of any intervention that we do here. So the green buffer is in that regard. And then we have the walkways to promenade along the canal. Then we have the a strip for the utilities such as lampposts, signages, dustbins, etc. And then another green buffer eventually that leads to the landscape parking area. But that green buffer is again for owing to the existing trees. Another view for the same, this is how the canals look like today. And this is how we imagine it to be. So as I already mentioned, we have—
Niyati,
Yes.
Niyati, can you go a little slow?
Okay,
It's fine.
sure.
You don't need to hurry. Just explain and
Sure,
pause
sure.
at the key slides.
Yes,
Don't run
yes.
in the.
Sorry. So I'll keep it slow. So we have, we basically have these bridges for cross connections, and then the green buffer. So a few places don't have trees along that, but we'll of course maintain the green buffer. Then you have the red granite walkways to promenade along, and then a few seating areas with a view of the canal to be enjoyed basically. Then when we go talk about the amenities and vending. Now vendors are extremely important to the avenue, but they also cause a hindrance to the traffic and a source of litter and dirt. Now, as you can see, they are spread here because they lack an alternative. So they are haphazardly spread along Rajpath right now. And they're also seen to occupy the barren lawns along the canals because of, as I mentioned earlier, the tree pattern. And the avenue also lacks adequate public conveniences and amenities. So we only see the public conveniences near Vijay Chowk and a couple of them near India Gate. So this is when we map it out, this is how it looks. So we have 2 toilet blocks here and 2 toilet blocks here, and they're of course insufficient for the amount of area and the footfall that it witnesses. So what we propose is to have all of these in orange that you see are the proposed amenities, and these are the toilet blocks that we would like to retain. And these facilities these amenities basically have these many facilities within them. They have toilet blocks and all the services as mentioned in the slide that you can see in this particular place. Now I'll be zooming into this particular red box to see what exactly the design is. So of course, there will be more public conveniences as I mentioned earlier. So this is the amenity block in question. This is the vending plaza that will have which will be at grade level, and the amenities would be at a lower level. So it is very well attached with the public parking space that we are giving, and it is right behind the canals with a good walkway connectivity. So pedestrian network is very well connected to this particular space. So the below ground area of this amenity block looks something like this. So there's toilets and drinking water facilities, access through ramps and stairs on either sides, and then you have some service areas also. Yeah. So when we look at the isometric, this is how the space looks like. This is the canal at the far right. You have the green buffer, the walkway, another green buffer, and then the access stairs and ramps. You have a courtyard so that it does not feel like a very underground claustrophobic space. It will be much more open, well-lit, well-ventilated kind of a space. And the roof would be green to make it seamless to the overall landscape. So when we look within, this is how the space would look like. So this is the area that we are talking about in this. This is the area behind the canals where the amenities are being proposed. So it's poorly maintained. The lawns are just dull and tired, and all of these walkways are just created due to pedestrian movements. This is another area showing the same at a different time of the year, and this is how we visualize this space to be. So this is the area where you have the access to the lower level amenities. The organized vending plaza, as I mentioned, would be here. And this is going to be quite a shaded area because of the existing trees and also some of the proposed ones. Coming to the parking. Now the avenue lacks adequate parking for tourists normally and for special events. This is how the parking is seen along the edges of Rajpath. And this is the fact that there's no walking space left because of parking and the vending that happens along Rajpath is a visual here. And the area behind the canals is used for parking, vending, and is encroached upon by some nurseries and even parking for some adjacent ministry buildings as well. So this is the area which otherwise is presumed to be lawns, but this is the actual condition of the space. So the unorganized parking has been mapped in this. So this is generally where you predominantly see the parking, around 600 car parks, I would say. And this is where we have allocated the space behind the canals for parking. So we have visitor parkings, a special allocated space for bus parkings, which is closer to India Gate because it sees a lot of footfall for the tourists. Then you have the Ola Uber parking right above it in the map. And then all of this is open to visitors. And when we look at the overall transport model for this space, we have a couple of shuttle loops that connect to the various upcoming facilities as well as facilities that are already present in the area. So the shuttle loop that you see along in blue is the one along Rajpath, which will take you from the proposed national museums to India Gate and across the whole sea hexagon loop. And so it will of course connect a lot of other facilities that happen here. And these are very well connected through pedestrian access to the parking that we are proposing behind the canals. And this is the metro, Central Secretariat Metro stop here and the Udyog Bhavan here. So even that would be well connected through, through these shuttle loops. And we have the National Biodiversity Arboretum, which is at the extreme west. And one shuttle loop would connect to that as well. And another one to the New India Gardens that is at the banks of Yamuna. Sorry. So the area behind the canals that is currently underutilized is eventually imagined to be a space like this. So basically a very landscaped area which could be dually used during national events and some special events that need a lot of parking spaces. So this will be shaded parking bays with grass paver parking bays and the driveway also made in grass pavers. So the proposed parking areas for the visitors and tourists would actually have a green buffer. The other side of the entire parking space would be like this. So you have the driveway, shaded parking bays and the green buffer as well. So the area again in question beyond the canals looks something like this today. And this is the connection that we are providing with the parking space. So you can see the green parking here, and then you have the pedestrian connections and the rest I've already mentioned. The pedestrian underpass. Now this is a new introduction that we would be doing to this area, but as you can see, the street junctions have heavy traffic and are unsafe for pedestrians right now. This is an image of sea hexagon. And the pedestrian underpasses that we would like to propose are at these two locations. So the Janpath Rajpath junction and the sea hexagon Rajpath junction are the areas where we are proposing these pedestrian underpasses. And when we zoom in, this is how the underpasses would look like. So the design of the underpass has been done in a way that it falls between the existing rows of trees. So there's minimal tree transplantation that happens because of anything that we intervene with here. So this is how the underpass looks. You can see the stairs, the landing, the entire area that goes below, and then you have this entire space that is below Janpath, and then you can just come out from this particular space. So how this has been designed is something like this. So we have like this 2-meter buffer that we are considering from the existing tree trunks, and then the whole area has been designed and placed. So the area that looks something like this between the avenues of trees would eventually be something like this. So we have the underpass at the junctions. It is going to be shaded by the trees on both sides, and then you have the signages and some more utilities such as lampposts, etc., that would be edging it. So another view of how this space could look like from another angle would be something like this. And from within, or rather below the roads, this is how the space would be. So which can also have a dual purpose of having exhibitions and small artistic gatherings, etc. Coming to the transit plaza. Now, the multimodal transit stops lack adequate amenities for its users. So there are basically 2 transit stops that we see in this area. One is the Central Secretariat, the other one is Udyog Bhavan. This image is of the Central Secretariat metro station. And this is the area in reference. So the area that looks something like this today, we eventually intend to have it a little bigger, make it like a plaza, have more facilities and utilities for people to have a better convivial space there. So another image of how this space is currently. So there's unorganized vending, unhygienic surrounding conditions. There's no place for litter and dirt to be put off. The landscape around this area is poorly maintained. No seating spaces basically. And this is what we propose. So this is the transit plaza. You can see the Central Secretariat exit gate here. You have the organized vending spaces here, some public utilities such as the benches, ramps and stairs for access for universal design. And then you have some bicycle and U-route stands here. You have the bus lane separately, another service by lane for paratransit modes of travel. Okay, so that was it about the typical avenue. Now coming to the India Gate precinct. Now India Gate, as everyone knows, attracts a very large number of tourists on daily basis. This is an image of a daily image of this space basically. And this is how it is on special occasions. So New Year Day in 2018, and this is the footfall that it witnessed. But the area is still ill-equipped to handle this footfall. There is barricading for security purposes. Sorry. There's some temporary check-ins, security kiosks for entry exits in this area. And the lawns are damaged by Republic Day parade arrangements. Now, India Gate precinct today looks something like this. And what we intend to do is, this is the overall plan for this space. So basically you enter this space through a pedestrian underpass. You have the India Gate Plaza, which is going to be much wider than what it is today. And it is going to be like, you'll see it in the visuals as to what exactly is each one of these spaces. And then you have India Gate parks on both sides. You have India Gate parks on both sides. These have some landscape elements such as the step plazas, some grass mounds, with amenities behind these plazas as well. And what you see here is also some more landscape elements that we'll see in the visuals further. So when we talk about the pedestrian underpass, these are the underpasses that we are planning. Sea Exit sees a huge amount of pedestrian traffic and becomes unsafe for people to use. When we zoom into this space, the basic fundamentals and principles of the design remain the same. We have designed it in between the rows of trees. So there is, of course, the shaded part remains as it is. And then you of course, have minimum tree transplantation there. Yeah, the 2-meter buffer. And this is how the whole space looks like from below the ground level. So this is the area in question. This is how India Gate looks like today. And this is how, this is where we are introducing these pedestrian underpasses. So we have the ramps and stairs for pedestrian comfort, wide green belt between the access points. And then you have the pedestrian underpass opening to this beautiful monument that you see in front. So basically the whole idea of this underpass is to not just be a transit mode, but be a public space in itself. So the width, the facilities within it, the well-lit, well-ventilated areas have been seen to it in such a way that this does not seem like one mode of transit where you're just trying to cross the road. That's not how we have thought about it. This is going to be a public space in itself. Yeah, this is the view from below. Now talking about the India Gate Plaza. Now India Gate, as we see, this is how the street that leads to India Gate looks like today. And this is how we envision this space to be. So the plaza would be a wide plaza to accommodate the footfall. You'll have motorable paving for national events. And then you have these hydraulic bollards that can go down only during national events. And otherwise this remains a very pedestrian friendly zone. Talking about the India Gate Parks and the stepped plaza. So we have included these landscape elements within the India Gate Parks on both sides. There are these step plazas, grass mounds and planters and some amenities right behind this area. Once we see the visuals, we'll be more clear about what exactly we are looking at in this space. This is how the amenities would look like from below the ground. So you have toilet and drinking water facilities, you have the access ramps from both sides, and there would be some kiosks and information centers also, which are planned within this space. Now there's also a central courtyard that you can see in the design here. So this space does not, again, feel like something very claustrophobic where you're going below the ground surface. So it's supposed to be, we intend it to be far more open and it feels like any other space at ground level. Yeah, so this is another isometric image of the same. This is the stage for the step plaza. This is the seating area. We have the shrubs and planters on this end. We have walkways connecting this entire space. This is the entry to the underground amenities. And of course, we have the green buffer on that end too. And when we look at the image of the area below the ground level, this is how the space is. We have the courtyard in the center and we have all the facilities on either side. So the area that looks something like this would eventually be looking like this. So you have India Gate here behind the trees, the grass mounds that surround the India Gate Step Plaza, and we have the entry to the amenities here. And yeah, this is the entire space. Another angle of the same area, and this is where we intend to have the Step Plaza, the stage for performances. So this does not have to be a very formal space. This will just have India Gate as a backdrop, but it will be a public space for people to just enjoy for even some very light performances and for regular daily usage as well. Now coming to the Vijay Chowk precinct. Now a few beautiful images of Vijay Chowk pre-independence that we see here. This is one of those areas. This is Vijay Chowk here. We have the parliament here, north and south block, and the rest of the area was not developed at that point. And this is how the space looks like, used to look like. We have some stepped, we have 3 arches here that are currently hidden by the increase in the road levels. I'll talk about it further once we reach there. And this is how the whole space looked like. And yeah, this is one of the early images around independence. This was somewhere between 1947 and 1950. And this is how the space looks like today. So now Vijay Chowk's original formal grandeur and austere beauty has been much marred by unthoughtful additions and alterations. And this project basically intends to restore the heritage character of Vijay Chowk. So these are the 6 things that we intend to do in order to restore the heritage character. I'll go through it one by one. So many decades of unthoughtful road resurfacing has raised ground levels, buried the lower portions of many architectural elements and marred their beauty. So when we look at this, this is one beautiful image from 1927, which shows us the levels of the original road and with respect to the Vijay Chowk fountains. And this is what it is today. So the road has basically risen by 7 inches, and this makes the beautiful fountain no longer visible as a whole. The three arches that I was mentioning at that point, they used to have these 5 steps, and now all we can see is these 3. So these steps are buried due to the rise in the levels in the greens, of course, owing to the rise in the level of the roads. So many decades of unthoughtful planting, shabby addition of infrastructure elements, and poorly designed toe walls, curbs, pavings, etc. have cluttered the austere grandeur of Vijay Chowk. We'll have a look at all of those. So now when you see here, the addition of these shrubs mar the austere grandeur of the architecture behind it. These poorly detailed facade lighting mars the architecture north and south block walls. Unthoughtful topiary plantations along the edges of all of these historical elements, but here we can clearly see it around the fountains and here along the toilet blocks. This is the area that leads you to the toilet blocks, and here also there are like these unplanted hedge plantations obstructing the access to the lawns, unnecessary addition of toe walls, shabby road resurfacing that has been done. And this is again an image of 1962, which shows the original tree landscape around this area. Here you can also see that the road levels were pretty much at the same level as the greens, and even here you can see all of those levels pretty much there. But there are all of these additions that have happened now. So basically the unplanned plantation has marred the beauty of this entire historic precinct. Now the original pavings and pathways will also have to be restored. So this was originally planned as a pathway, but now is an asphalt road and is serving a dual purpose of parking spaces as well. Protective plinths will have to be added to this area to protect the heritage structures and prevent unthoughtful planting. So all of these areas where we see this ad hoc planting hiding the grand austere structures behind them need to have protective plinths basically. An integrated, efficient infrastructure network would be laid out to ensure clean, hygienic water throughout the year. So we would intend to make the fountains functional and hygienic. There are some incoherent architectural additions also seen in this place. So those also would be worked out. There's a poorly maintained water and loose cabling that we see across in the fountains. And finally, there will be the improvement in the traffic management infrastructure. So badly placed canopy that you can see here mars the whole symmetry of the road. So all in all, Vijay Chowk precinct looks something like this today. And this is how we envision this space to be. When we look at it in 3D, this is how the space is imagined. So we basically make the fountains functional and hygienic. We improve the overall traffic infrastructure. The restoration of original road levels will be done. We'll be removing all the ad hoc additions in terms of toe walls and hedges and plantations that I mentioned in the earlier slides would all be removed from this entire area. Protective plinths and pathways would be added, and the original paving and pathways would be brought back to its form. About the arrangements for Republic Day and the other events. So today the entire arrangement looks something like this. So what you see here are all the seating enclosures, which are not modular or standardized. We have temporary bridges all lined up on the canal, as you can see here. And we see these, the small things that you see behind the bridges are the frisking and security booths, and the parking happens behind that. So there are like these 3 levels of frisking, and then you enter your enclosures, but all of this is not modular or standardized. And this in section, this is how this space looks like. So you have Rajpath, you have your green buffer here, and then you have these chairs on plywood, which basically severely damage the lawns. And then you have these folding benches right behind it, and the parking and canals and everything happens behind that. So this is how currently the space, the arrangement is rather. So one of the images of how the space has been designed right now is something like this. So you have the chairs on plywood disrupting the lawns. And this is what we would like to propose. So standardized and rationalized arrangements for this entire area so that it takes minimum time to set up and dismantle, as well as it does not severely damage the lawns. So this is how we envision this space to be. So you have these standardized bleacher modules that are just brought in and placed on site and easily dismantled and taken back. So it takes much less time to dismantle and set up, but at the same time, it is at a higher level from the landscape, so it does not damage the landscape, basically. I'll show you some 3D visualizations to understand this better. So what we see to be something like this today would eventually look something like this. So what we have here is to have these robust crowd control measures, that is the barricading that we see today. Then we have these standardized bleacher modules. As you can see, these are not going to be damaging the lawns because they're not exactly sitting on the lawns as it is done right now. And then the security buffer is maintained as present. But having said that, we have these the crowd control measures or the barricading that we have these as inserts. So we have inserts provided within the walkways. So these barricades need to be basically just put into these inserts. So you don't have to do, you are not disrupting the lawn, basically. This provision has been done for that. And this is how these can be very easily transported. And we have some detailing that we have done in this regard. So this is how they are easily collapsible, and you can move it around places. And this is with seats, without seats. You can have it with the railing and barricading, all of that. Yeah. So, okay, coming to the tree landscape. Now the tree landscape, this is an aerial image of how formal, symmetric, and austere this tree landscape used to be. A very beautiful image from the 1960s that explains the same. So as you can see, we have these rows of trees, which was very close to what was originally envisioned by Lutyens. It was still in the 1960s following the same pattern. So when we reconstructed that aerial image into a drawing, this is how the original tree landscape looked like. And this is how the grid pattern was worked out, basically. And the array of crosses that you see on both sides of Rajpath had a serrated pattern of trees. And these were basically the species palette at that time. So as you can see, the entire Rajpath space was full of Raijamuns. And this was the area where you could still see these three different species. So you had the pines, Bistendu topiaries, and the Montsari. Now, over the years, haphazard planting has destroyed the original formal order, symmetry, and the austere grandeur of the Central Vista Avenue's tree landscape. So something that used to look something like this, which was the original tree landscape. After after carrying out a very detailed tree survey, this is one of our survey drawings. And this is a more detailed one with the actual canopy and girth size. And we have mentioned all the trees here that in respect to the large, small, and medium trees with flowering decidues, all of them are mentioned out here. And this is what we see today. This is the present tree landscape, which is far from what was originally envisioned by Lutyens. Currently, it has become a haphazard jungle, as it is evident from this particular image. And this is based on the survey that has been carried out in the last couple of months by our team here. And yes, this is as per the definition of the Delhi Preservation of Trees Act 1994. And yeah, this is the actual situation today. So we have 4289 trees with around 44 species instead of the original 4 species that were imagined. And when we map the small and insignificant trees on the avenue, which are around 1465, that you can see in red, and these are some of the species that we have mentioned here that fall into this category. So what is left after removing these, after rather not considering the small and insignificant trees, we have 2824 trees with 38 species, and this is how the plan looks like. So a new draft tree master plan of Central Vista Avenue aims to restore and enrich the formal order, symmetry, and grandeur of the avenue's tree landscape. Now this tree master plan would be gradually realized over a period of time. Now the design principles for the same include an iteration of Lutyens cross pattern with more trees and a new palette of tree species. I'll talk about each one of these as the slides go by. So now within this iteration of cross pattern with more trees, we basically would like to use the geometric pattern derived from Lutyens' original tree landscape. And in place of the original 454 trees, the plan envisages to have 962 trees. And eventually over time, we might have 1862 that will be planted elsewhere. So the original area of crosses on both sides of Rajpath, based on Lutyens' design, looks something like this. Let's zoom into this particular red box that you see on the screen, and I'll explain further as to what our whole intent is. So the original area of crosses in this segment looks something like this. This is one iteration of the area of crosses from the Lutyens' original design, and we do a further iteration of the area of crosses. And this is the final iteration of crosses, and this is how it would look. So the proposed new trees, new pattern of trees would be 962 trees on the avenue. And this is how the serrated pattern of trees would look like. So the Lutyens trees within this new pattern are the ones that you can see in green. So now when we talk about the species, we can talk about this further, right? So the new palette of tree species. Now, so we have the Lutyens rhizomes, and then we have the additional rhizomes, which are, most of them are already there. So when we look at each of these trees that each of these tree palettes that we are going to talk about, we are looking into the phenology, character, and socio-religious significance. So basically, we would like to look at the folia character and not just the flowering aspect of it. So the rhizomen has these characters. Then will be the dots that you see in red would be the pilkhan. And it has this spectacular reddish bronze foliage that you see around March through mid-April. And then you have these foliar effects that are beautifully shown in these two images that you see. And then there will be the kosam, which will be at the edges of the canal that you see in orange. Kosam again has this reddish brown, bright new foliage that happens around mid-April, March to mid-April. And these renew themselves in March. And the social religious significance is also strong in terms of medicinal properties and its worshipping. Now the Amalthas is planned to be there at the edges of the Central Vista Avenue, so more towards the compounds of the Central Secretariat. And we all know Amalthas, it has this beautiful yellow character during the summers. Then we plan to have Semal around the edges again. And then we talk about Came, which will be along with the Semals in the same line. And this is how the tree with the flowers looks like. And then we have the Barna, which is again going to line up in the same area. The new leaves and flowers that happen, that bloom in April, and then you have the burst of flowers in spring. Okay, now talking about some urban elements, street elements such as the lighting and signages. Now, currently that we see on Rajpath, the area is not well lit for a public space. The lux level comparisons were done by one of our consultants, and this is what we found on site. So what we proposed after having a good analysis was to have come up with this visual hierarchy diagram. It is pretty clear. We have one being the highest and 10 being the lowest. So we have the warmth of the lighting has been designed. Then we have the main vistas and focal point diagram. Near view, mid view, far view is all mapped. And a few visualizations of how the well-lit spaces would look like. This is an image of the India Gate Plaza. The areas along Rajpath, we have the walkways along the canals, and this is how the entry to the amenities block would look like. About the wayfinding strategy, the foremost thing to start any kind of wayfinding is basically to map all kinds of flows that happen in this space. So this is one map showing all of that. So we have mapped the public parking, the vehicular circulation, pedestrian circulation, VIP accesses due to the ministries, all the metro and bus stops and all of those routes that are being carried. in this area, and we have a wayfinding strategy pulled in. So we eventually using majorly for Central Vista Avenue, we have the primary streets and the pedestrian connectors that are most important to this space. And this is the sign family that we have come up after that. So you can see how the whole area would have signages of this kind. And the Central Vista map is basically on pillars which are inspired by the cast iron pillar in Delhi. So this is how the maps would be on them, and a few visualizations to show the same as to how the space would look like with the signages in it. And there's a signage type choice that we have made. So we have November as a typeface, which has been developed specially for this particular project. And this is how it looks in English and Hindi. So to wrap it up, basically, these are the 6 of our objectives. As I've mentioned earlier, we intend to basically retain the character of this space as it is, but add some facilities, amenities, and utilities so the space becomes far more convivial than what it is today. So the Central Vista Avenue that we see today looks something like this. We eventually intend for it to look like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Niyati.
Thank you.
Thank you, Niyati. I would, Aditya, if with your permission, I just request if Mr. Yogesh Kapoor would like to say a few words about this. We have let Niyati manage the presentation of all the information, a lot of packed information here. I'm sure that there are lots of questions and issues, but before that, Mr. Yogesh Kapoor, and after that, I think Pradeep is also here. Pradeep, are you here? If you could say a few words, if you'd like to say a few words, that would be nice too. Nikki, you have been leading the effort on this a lot. If you want to say a few words, let's have that. So let's start with Yogesh. Let's start with.
Good afternoon, Aditya, and good afternoon, everyone at Isola. I'll just go back to one of the original slides of Lutyens. If we can go back to that, I'll explain you. Niyati has explained you the design, but I think it's also important to understand. This is one of the slides. I think it's very important to understand how the planting was done, because Niyati was talking about iteration to the Lutyens grid. So we have to understand in this slide that the tree planting, which one can actually see if one is able to. I'll just annotate a few things with you. The vista actually is, I hope everyone is able to see that. This is the main Rajpath vista that one generally sees in all the what you call national events, and I think most of us have gone in our childhood or are going at these in these lawns and enjoying the night time, especially during summers as well as in the afternoon in the winters. So this is one. So one has to understand how the spacing of these trees was done by Lutyens. So the spacing, when one studied through all these, I never studied that earlier, but while doing this project, I had a chance to now understand the vista and how the tree planting is done in a vista. So it was very nice. It was very interesting to study that when we talk about a vista, generally we find that after a few years, the grass starts, we need to change the landscape around the trees. So and these trees are almost like 25 meters apart. What we see today is the additional trees in the center and another third row, which has been subsequently added to this, what you see in the plan today. So now, instead of the 2 rows and the wider planting, we see a large number of species which have been added to this. So that's one thing one needs to understand, and what Niyati was talking about, the iterations and how this. So at the present moment, what was originally about 450 odd jamun trees, at the present moment there are about 1250 odd jamun trees which are present in the vegetation. So we see that there are a lot of trees that subsequently added, and then a lot of other species like legastromias and that have been added next to the canal. In terms of zoning, so that's one thing when one can understand from the planting which was originally there and what has been subsequently added. So we see almost like approximately topiaries, if we leave topiaries, we see about 3,000 odd trees which have been added to this whole grand vista. Now, in terms, so that's one of the things I think when we are looking at these plans, and subsequently when we talk about the zoning of what amenities have been planned in this in the landscape plan, I'll just explain that part of it. This was one about the planting. I'll just clear this out.
The trash can.
So you see this in the present plan, this vista which is retained, this is still retained as a vista. Now, whatever the underpasses are happening, they're happening between these two rows of trees. So whatever is the underpasses that happen subsequently, I think what Niyati talked about, there is a road which has been added here. Because of the presence of the metro, I think that underpass is not presently being considered. The metro runs across that part. So the underpasses are actually happening in between the two rows of trees which are happening on the periphery of the canals. So, no, sorry, on the inside of the Rajpath lawn. So you have these, what you call one, and you have the other one happening here. It's not at this present location, but I'll explain you on the plan. I'm just trying to explain how the zoning has been comprehended, how the zoning has been planned in this whole landscape plan. Then secondly, when we talk about, you have seen in the pictures that this canal is existing here. You see a canal which is existing here. So still you get any road you stand or any at India Gate you stand, you still see a reflection of the north and the south blocks. So that too, and presently very few people are actually going, very few people visit this area because it's not safe, or it's not well lit, and in the night it's not presently being used, and you only find what you call bare earth walkways which exist there. So the intent is to highlight this central vista, as Niyati was pointing out. That's one aim. Now this has been done. So if actually one understands this, so there is a kind of a grid which actually exists. So what one is trying to say is that this is one axis, this is the second axis, and this is the third axis. And then this is the row of tree which is happening along that. So the what you call the central vista, the Rajpath, the canal vista is retained as it is. Now, because of the number of parking and number of as everybody knows that one is unable to access this area because of as the parking is not available. So and generally what is and at the present moment also what is happening is that there is a peripheral road going all around these areas. So you can see a peripheral road going across from one road to another. So in terms of that is why the parking has been proposed in that peripheral road itself. It's not that something is being proposed in that. The peripheral parking is proposed in this area. And in case of special events, if you what Niyati was talking about, the parking in grass pavers, that parking is subsequent to it. In case there is an event or something happening, that parking is used. That green area is used for parking. Now, the reason for parking is because we want to see this whole extent of green from one end to the other. So that is the extent that everything, whatever we're seeing here is, except for the paths which have been added along the canal, you see a complete stretch of green. And what the iteration, what the planting strategy was there, which is a long-term strategy, not a present strategy, because of the additional trees which have been planted. So the thing is that this vista is finally open to the public with all the three avenues clearly visible. That's the intent of this whole landscape, what we call the Central Vista Avenue.
Thank you, Yogesh. If Pradeep, if you would like to say a few words about whatever
Sure.
the trees particularly and the strategy for the trees.
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
So, the problem with the Central Vista today is pretty much the problem that you get in all our parks in Delhi, which is that what happens is that horticultural departments tend to have planting budgets every year. And they go on planting even in places that are designated open spaces, so that you eventually you will get, if the CPWD was allowed to go on planting here for another 30 years, you'd get a dense woodland throughout the Central Vista. So the problem really here is, how do you recover some of the heritage plan that Lutyens had without sacrificing too many trees? And that really is the central problem that we tried to address. And I think it was Dr. Rao who came up with the solution that if you take the X's that Niyati showed you in the plan, and you shiver the X's in such a way that each stroke of the X yielded 2 additional lines, you actually multiplied the number of Jamun trees by 2, thereby getting more trees into the plant, but yet you retain that lovely X structure that was part of Lutyens' plan. So that was one very important step, I think, that HCP took in envisioning the avenues. The other, of course, was, I'm very happy that they accepted my suggestion that we use some trees that are known to be native, that are known to be completely at home in Delhi's climate and in this particular Bangar soil, so that once they were established, they would need absolutely no looking after, no watering, no nutrients. And I think that ought to be the fundamental basis on which any tree is selected for planting, in Delhi. So the trees that the trees that Niyati showed you, starting with the Pilkhan and the Amaltas and the Kosam and then the other 3, were all taken for that reason. And for me, at least, the primary motive was to use foliar effects in preference to flowering effects, simply because foliage effects last longer. And there is something that I find completely magical about Delhi's spring. So starting sometime in March and going through till April, sometimes even into May, you get foliar effects that are really, really beautiful. And I thought that if we could bring those foliar effects into Rajpath, it would be truly wonderful. But I think it's, I now truly believe that the tree plan for Rajpath is a well thought out plan. But I'd love to hear responses from the landscape architecture community. I just have one suggestion, Aditya, that I'm just wondering whether the best way to hear responses, whether reading them out is going to be as good as listening to, and watching people when they're on screen and talking about their points.
I'm fine with that, if that's what people want to do. I do want to remind our group here that there is going to be a GBM following this meeting. And so that we want to leave enough time at the end, and please grace us with your presence too. So after this meeting is finished, I would like all of us landscape architects from Delhi to stay on for that meeting. And so whatever comments and, or questions there are, let's keep them brief, hear the answer, and give other people a chance too. So 1 question per person, or maybe 2, and then maybe we can do it that way. I'm fine with that as well. What would you prefer, Bimal?
Oh, it's fine. I'm absolutely fine with people, themselves asking the questions and giving their comments.
I would request everyone to turn on their video when they ask their question, and we can start asking them now. Maybe only question, the issue with that is people kind of the sequence of who goes first. Are we ready for questions now? Bimal, are we finished with the presentation?
Yes. I wanted to say a few words. I think just very, very briefly, I think we have not tried and articulated our design approach, design values in separate terms. You can see how we are approaching the design through all the proposals that we have made. As you can see, we see this as a magnificent place that works, first of all, as an icon for all of India. It's a magnificent vista, and in everybody's memories as something that symbolizes the country. It's a setting for big national events, for the Republic Day parade. And so it's an extremely important space from that point of view. It's a civic garden for Delhi. It's a tourist destination. So it has multiple uses and multiple constituencies. Over the years, as I said, it like everything in India, because of the pressure of use, because of slight changes in the use, because of the way the infrastructure issues have developed, it has become very stressed. And really our approach is, it's an approach saying that, listen, let's look at where all the stress points are. Let's try and find out how we can most unobtrusively address these stress points, and what we can do to refurbish the place so that it comes to its original sort of a grandeur. Of course, there's nothing like completely original. Things have changed over a period of time. There are a lot more trees. It's a different place. There's lots more people using it. And so it will change, but we do not want it to lose its essential character. And that's what we have tried to do here. So I'll stop at that. And I hope that what I have said comes through in the approach that we have, in the proposals that we have shown you. So I'll stop at that, Aditya, and let's go for the questions.
Maybe I'll start with the first question since I have the mic here. My feeling, one question was that, the edges seemed like such a lost opportunity by just saving them for parking. And I was wondering, that the opportunity at this particular junction of redoing this great open space was to make it more of something than it is already. If there's a possibility to make it a greater place by adding more program and more interest. So, Rajpath itself is a kind of vibrant street, and the other pathways people walk on. Sujata, can you maybe mute? I wonder whose noise this is. But I'm just wondering, is it possible to not have more program along the edges, maybe have some way to include more people instead of just delegating it to parking? And why is there this 17% is a large amount of space that's underutilized? Why just formalize parking there? That's one thing. And around the parking itself, is that parking going to be free, or is that going to become is going to be charged? But I really feel that space is that's the opportunity area, and that's not being grabbed this time.
Okay, so, a number of things that people say are going to be in the nature of suggestions. Instead of saying yes, no, XYZ, we are going to take all these suggestions down, spend some time thinking about it, propose to also the clients and, the agencies that we work with about these inputs that we have got, and then come to a conclusion about it. But you're right, at this point, while the far ends of the Vista, we have not used to create more program. We've tried, but to try and provide in that zone the amenities that you need for making the rest of the place useful. And that's what we have done. I'm not saying that's the only way it can be done. That's what we have done. You're right about that. We take, I take what you're saying, and it's something that's worth discussing, whether we need more program here and whether we might use these spaces for other things. But presently, you're right, it's amenities and parking. The only place where we have added something, so to say, is in the near the India Gate. Nikki, am I right about this, Nikki?
Yes, Bimbal, you are right.
Yeah.
It's not only that it's unprogrammed those edges; those have become dead edges with those hard walls. Where of course, you've heard the opportunity to create museums that was missed here. Those public buildings could have been public buildings instead of private office buildings in a way for the government. That edge is a completely dead edge. So this park only has two ends. The sides are completely unused, and why not a long, linear, narrow museum along the entire end? Why take the museum and park it at the north and south block? And it's like a dead edge. I'm really concerned about those edges being completely dead edges. And it's not only a wasted opportunity, but it's also a dead space.
I get what you're saying. It's not something that I'd like to respond to straight away because these are programmatic decisions. And it's, there could be, there could be other readings that would say the museums are being put in the most magnificent location that you can put them in. And that in any case, not everything can be vibrant. Everything cannot be programmed. There have to be some service spaces and some some served spaces and some servant spaces, as Louis Kahn would have put it. And indeed, we have given the space at the far end of the vista to more service function, a secondary function that makes everything else usable. That's what we have done. That's not necessarily the only way it could have been done. I can imagine that could have been done differently. So that's what it is. But you are asking a big question about program level. We take it on board. We promise to discuss it with people that that eventually decide these things. It's not, you are a professional designer. You know that you work with your clients to do these sort of things, and we will take it up and say this was one of the suggestions that came, and it's worth thinking about.
Okay, I think Sujata Kohli has some questions, and then after that, Veena.
Yeah, hi. So my question, Vimal, is that why the use of granite? It's a very alien material to Lutyens daily. Secondly, just alongside, how much of a pervious area we are converting into impervious? So in doing so many areas paved, the free spirit of the space seems to have been curtailed. So these are all connected questions.
Okay. I'm going to let perhaps Nikki, perhaps Yogesh respond to the question about granite and stone. I can assure you one thing. That's not a decision that has been easy. There are very, very contradictory, opposed views about what is right between people who have to maintain the space and the people who are designing and building the space. I'm sure you understand that these are not decisions. There's been a time when we've thought of sandstone as the best. Then we've decided that perhaps that is not the best thing to do. Perhaps granite is better. It will be more easily maintainable. Those sort of considerations have been in there. We've tried to do it so that the color remains the same, regardless of what it is. Let me also say that this question, some of the visuals that we have put in tend to show the places which have the pathways, etc. So somehow the pathways get overrepresented in the visuals. Our team has heard this issue every time. So, you're turning the greens all into paved areas, and have done some calculations about this. Presently, how much is paved, how much is pure mud because people just walk over it, and how much is paved in its place. So if somebody wants to, Niyati or somebody wants to say something about this, I'll let you put the facts, and then perhaps Yogesh about the stone and the granite.
Okay, Sujata answering, I'll just answer this, Vimal.
Yeah, sure.
Sujata, yeah, Sujata, I'll just add to this. Presently, the place has about, of the total area, about 18.4% is paved. That includes road, that includes the sidewalks. That is the amount of paving which is presently existing in this area. 18.4% of the total area. It's about what you call 79 hectares. So it's about, so 18.4% is what is exactly at the moment paved. Then about 10.45% of the whole area is canals and fountains. 10.45% is total canals and fountains. So in the new plan, what you see at the present moment, there is only an increase of 1% of the area, which includes the amenity blocks also. So whatever is presently there at the present moment, because there are lots of paths which are not visible, which are presently there, a lot of spaces where there are bus parking and private buses are being parked, there's vehicles being parked. So I can, what the calculations with this design is that there's only an increase of about 1% of the paved area in the whole space. That includes the building. I'm not saying the paved areas. I'm even saying it includes the built up, whatever underpasses or buildings, amenity blocks are being taken.
Could you say something about the granite and the sand and the stone?
Yeah, so this is a long discussion. This is a long discussion, and what Bimal pointed out is absolutely right. We had a long discussion on this, and I can even say that is at the last moment it has been changed, because presently what is happening is people are looking at the war memorial. I think we as landscape architects should be very clear about certain of the things. There is already a granite, which is a lot of granite, which has been put in the war memorial, and it's a large area there. So this discussion about sandstone and discussion about granite went on till even the end of last month also, and the people who are supposed to maintain it, they have their own reasons for saying so, and I don't want to discuss that, because they are the final people who are going to build this and they're going to maintain it. So that they had a lot of concerns even about sandstone. I don't practically, you see that we work in sandstone, and I'm very convinced about doing that in sandstone, not in granite. But but the way that it has been done in certain parts of these areas, that is how they have perceived it also. So it's very difficult to convince people in within the organization who have to maintain it. That is how this material is come up with that. How this material has come up with that.
May I jump in for a second
yes.
and say, Yogesh, that as the person who was sort of, I'm not a landscape architect, as you all know very well. I had the privilege of seeing this discussion going on and standing there on the side and saying, listen, we have to come to a conclusion at some point. And I did turn around to our landscape people, including Nikki Shah, who's urban design, and Yogesh and everybody. I said, is this a deal breaker one way or the other? And I must say that the team said, no, it's not a deal breaker. We prefer one or the other. In which case I said, let's take the advice of the people who are going to be responsible for maintaining it. And that's how we went ahead. So I take the liberty of saying all these things and talk. I mean, in other forums, I would just say, no, this is what we strongly believe in and agree, but we are all professionals here. And so often decisions are difficult. They are not one way or the other. And so this was one of those difficult decisions here.
And one more thing, Sujata, I'll add that decision was basically for the pavings, not for the elements, vertical elements like cladding and coping and things like that. It was basically for the paving they had this issue of.
Yeah, but paving is what gets seen the most, you know. I mean, that is what is making the character. So anyway, yeah, I think.
No,
I mean,
I'll tell you, Sujata, the whole thing has come up from the war memorial. Because
yeah, but if it's been done wrong at one place,
no, that's fine. It's fine, but that's how.
I think we are all professionals and we understand that. You know, I hope you will not believe that.
No, I absolutely believe. I'm just saying you maybe if there's a chance to
no. There is no more chance. There's no more discussion about this issue. I stood over this discussion, saw all sides discuss, and finally decided there was not so much at stake, and so we will go with what we have decided. That's I'm saying all of this only because I'm amongst this group of professionals who understand the difficult position that we are all in at various times. So let's not belabor this too much and let's go ahead. I just wanted us to know that. Yeah.
Next, Veena, you want to ask your question? Veena has a question. Veena,
yes. My question was that what's the existing versus the proposed tree count that we have in the proposal? And are we sacrificing a lot of trees in the process of getting back Lachin's original planting scheme?
Pradeep, do you want to take this, or do you want me to do a?
I can add certain, Bimal, I can add.
Let Pradeep
first speak about it.
I think it's simplest for Niyati to go back to the map because it shows it very clearly. Basically, all the trees that are regarded as being outside the Jamun avenues, we think of as being, additions that shouldn't be there. But many of them are actually standing in places where we should have a Jamun tree. And I think the basic plan is to wait for these trees either to show signs of aging or of stress, and to replace them gradually and not to just cut them down and take them away just because they're in the wrong place. Am I right, Niyati?
Yes.
So the numbers are, so what do the numbers come to now, the latest thing?
I'll just go to the existing, just
Yeah.
a second. So, yeah.
Niyati, may I take
Yes,
just
yes,
say this in a slightly different way than you said it. Let's go further, go back a couple of slides. Go to Latiensis plan before that. Yeah, okay. So the original tree landscape had around how much?
54.
454 trees.
Yeah.
Veena, can you hear what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
So original tree landscape reconstructed from the pictures showed 454 trees, and they are drawn up here. And there were 4 species, right? Now you go further. And so we did a very detailed survey. Next, please. Next, please. And if you take, next, please. If you take all trees considered according to Delhi Preservation of Trees Act, there is 4,289 trees there and 44 species. And you can see that the order has been lost and there is sort of a planting all over the place. Next, please. Now, if you take away the invasive species, the bougainvillea, the shrubs and hedges, and the ficus topiaries, all of which are counted as trees according to the Act, then 1465 are these sort of things: topiaries, hedges, etc. They're not in true form something that you might call, sort of trees, at least not the bougainvillea and the hedges and the topiary. Next, please. Now, even if you were to take them away, there's 2,824 trees there. Okay. That's still, you can see in the plan that it's quite densely planted, and the original Lutyens tree planting intention is simply not there. Okay, so we did this. We are still in the process of developing a sort of a tree master plan, which will guide the planting henceforth. We are not talking about immediately cutting down trees or things like that, but we want to have a tree master plan that the horticulture department decides to honor over a 2-decade period. Okay. And obviously, there's no question of going back to the 454 trees that were originally there. But our tree master plan, the draft one that we have prepared just now, shows 962 trees. And the pattern is being made up in this fashion. Next, please. We sort of, jiggled this or shivered this across. Shivered is the word Pradeep has correctly invented for this. And we came up with a pattern that looks like this. And then we go further. And then we said, listen, are we going to stick to the original 4 species that Lutyens had thought of? And we said, no, perhaps we can think of more colors there, but through foliage. And that's how this came up, this whole idea of some other trees. So next and next and next and next. So eventually, yes, we said we'll keep the jamuns that were originally there, some more jamuns, next please. And then we would use pilkans, next please, next please, next, and kosams, and next, and amaltas, next, and something else, next, and next, samal, and next. Yeah, next. And we said we could create, this would be a master plan that would be sort of, next please. Yeah. So Barna there, next please, next please. Oops, sorry. So eventually you would get, go back please, one slide, back. Yeah, so eventually you would get a pattern somewhat like this that becomes a master plan that lies around that the horticulture department would honor over a period of time. This is what we try to get to. Now that would be, you know, over a 20-year period. That's what we are thinking. We're thinking, how do you slowly transform a landscape from one to the present? If this master plan is something that we do finalize, and it's by no means final, then there is about 1,000 trees in it instead of the original 454. Okay, and instead of the present 2,084. Now is over 20-year period. So slowly, but you do need a guiding document of some sort to guide the tree planting, and that's what we have tried to work out. Okay, instead of saying there's going to be a drastic transformation, we're saying a gradual transformation guided by a very a plan at the end. Now, Pradeep, would you like to say something else at this point?
No, Bimal, I think you've done a good job of explaining it. I think that, you know, I mean, the reason I suggested these particular species was that I thought that it would make a really beautiful avenue that celebrated the best of the trees that make Delhi very special and the trees that behave in a particular way in spring, right? So I think that once this point is realized, it will probably be after my lifetime, but once it's realized, I think it will make a really beautiful set of trees in Rajpath. And it obviates the need to actually remove trees in the meantime in some horrible drastic way.
Okay, we'll go on. We've discussed the trees enough. Maybe Preline has something to say.
No, it's there, it's written, well, in trees,
Okay.
why are the references only to a particular community, considering the architecture of Vista was expression of a syncretic culture? Because in your socio-cultural, under the socio-cultural head, it just sort of struck me that there was only one community which was referred to.
What do you mean by the community? The maintenance people, the people who maintain it?
No, there was, you know, there's just mention of Ayurveda. If you go to those slides, you can, I mean, I don't know what I'm saying. Yeah.
There was, if I may, Pradeep, you want to take that?
Yeah, well, the Barna, for example, is held sacred at Peer shrines. Definitely. So is at least one or two other trees. So no, there's no sense at all of it being guided by. I was looking at the trees first and then seeing what values those trees had. I wasn't going community-wise or religion-wise. So for you to look at those values and point to, you know, to think that this might be guided by some Hindu-centric ideas is completely wrong, really.
But Pradeep, the socio-religious significance, then maybe in the text, you need to change that.
We need to add that. We need to, I'd agree with you.
Because in your slide,
I
agree with you. That's an error on our part.
The Barna in particular, you find it, you know, very often you'll find it at Mazar, you know, Peer Mazars. It's very, very.
Yeah, so why not state it? Why not state it?
State it, I agree with you, really.
I think one thing I'd like to just reiterate, we've sort of flogged that subject to death, but you know, the budgery is kind of iconic to me as part of that space, and there's a soft space, and clients would like to have budgery paths and to make them all granite. I know we've put that subject to bed, but I think Prilian's point is well taken, that it's soft to the eye and soft under the foot. And it's a real loss. My feeling, it's a real loss to lose the budgery paths. They could have been done in such a way that they could have been maintained. I know they're maintenance headache, but you know, if they're built properly with under drainage, they could have been maintained. Nupur, you want to move on to your question, please?
Thanks, Aditya. I'm going to be looking at two screens. Thank you very much. First off, I want to just start saying that it's been an excellent presentation, excellently put together. And I've already said that I wanted to put things in writing because sometimes we lose essence and I might forget some points, and I was typing while this was happening. So to keep it quick, my only thought is that somehow we've made a very beautiful project out of a space where today the world over we are, writing about urban parks, urban spaces. Everyone is understanding we don't need to look at, a lot of problems that were mentioned were maintenance problems. These are upkeep problems, management problems. And I think we have projectized them and built and done what was probably required of us in the project brief. But somehow I do feel that we needed, I don't think the time's gone. We need to step back and look at this as, even if, I'm not going to talk about the cultural landscape angle and all of those, the need of the hour is not breaking up the space, not doing it up, not aesthetically addressing it. I think once the vision is clear that, this world is now something else, it's going towards something else. We can't fragment a space further or spend on, we have to look at so many nature-based solutions. So my point was that once we have that vision clear, then the question of granite or not, the question of which tree palette or not, I think is just very, very simple and straightforward, budgery or something else, or where we build or where we don't. So I just feel I've written out what I was typing while Niyati was presenting, and I want to congratulate her for a professional to be facing the entire audience and making such a professional presentation. But my point is stepping back a little bit and really looking at the whole thing differently. So I really, I'm a bit disturbed by that. I'm just being frank and honest up here. But thank you very much for taking out the time and presenting to all of us. Thank you very much.
Jasleen, would you like to go ahead?
May I?
Sure, yeah. Sorry, please.
May I just thank you very much for your kind comments about the presentation on behalf of Niyati and the entire team, everybody sort of who put this marvelous set of drawings and illustration, everything together. Thank you for your kind appreciation of that. All of us as professionals like an acknowledgement of that, and thank you very much. I can see what you're saying. Ours has been a strategy of being least disruptive and sort of saying, okay, here's a space that is used a particular way and let's see what we can fix about it. You're right. Perhaps it's a timid strategy. Perhaps it's not as visionary as it can be. But given the context of the project, yes, this is what we have done. We sort of looked at the space and figured out how it's being used and how it might be used better. Used better in the sense of how it might serve its function better. So yes, I see what you're saying. Food for thought. I am going to keep it. And let's see what we can do with it. Thank you very much. Yeti, can you go back to one of the plan views so that we have a reference point that's different?
Jasleen, I think
yeah.
you want to.
Hi.
Please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Aditya. And yes, to the entire HCP team and Niyati for a great presentation. And I would say that, offhand, of course, not commenting on the design because it's complex and also a very complicated project given its background. So I'm sure that, the designing and giving the solutions with all its constraints would not have been easy, but, fairly, I would say, lucid presentation and sequenced very nicely. So we understand almost thoroughly what is being proposed and can react to it. I have two very minor questions. One, I find that the food courts have been taken. Are they at a lower level? Eventually, this entire stretch kind of works considerably. The people come here. So could an alternative have been thought of, because it appears to me now that the food vendors are being considered some kind of a nuisance and hence they're being put out of sight. And that takes away the magic of that food vending process and the way people like to eat. So is that, it's maybe I've misread the drawing and the design.
Nikki, can I ask you to respond to this? Nikki, please.
Yes, I'm here. I'll speak. wherever there's the building which are underground are the toilet blocks and the other utility facilities. We do have consideration of the dedicated area for the food vending. So if you see this particular rendering, it is at the street level only and accessible from the street side where most people are walking. So vending is the first consideration in entire project, where we have distributed across the length because they are random. Just now there are focused areas, yes, India Gate and the few junctions, and keeping those in mind and the vicinity of the vending spaces and their businesses, the places have been identified and at the grade level only and not underground, first of all. So there are vending areas, organized vending. The mechanism of how this vending will be organized and what kind of design of those carts and everything will come through. Currently, the space has been identified. Only the area where in the India Gate, where the part of the landscape, we have the two sunken building, as Niyati mentioned, with the courtyard. There are few additional built shops or shops, I would say. It can be converted into a food court and information center. So those dedicated places have been identified, which are sunken. But if you see the quality of the architecture and the spaces, they won't feel like a sunken places. So those are the areas only which has you can say that food courts going to be in sunken. Rest of the areas are going to be at grade level only.
Also, is it where the food carts are located? Are they on the parking side?
No, that it's towards the street side. Near you want to open the plan of one of the amenity block and the junction. I will explain.
Ghislaine, you're right. I think food vendors need to be where the business is, and the business is where people are. So it has to be.
You assume they're going to be walking on the street side, which is on near to the edge on the
so when they come out of
they
come out of the parking, they come out of the parking. That's where all along the edge. Yes, along the sidewalk. That's
what
we
point
assume.
out. Yeah,
it takes away from the I'm just thinking. You have these cross connections, right? Which are connecting it. You have these pathways.
Right.
Which are breaking that long stretch of the lawn.
Right.
So can you not have some temporary spaces there, along that, and people can bring, because these carts are mobile carts, and if they can bring the carts, and then, because otherwise then this is becoming.
That's worth thinking about. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because otherwise now it's becoming up to fit parking area becomes one big. What is the big business? Then a parking area is nothing but one food vending sort of a thing. Na? So then we are making people, bringing people to that parking lot to eat. Whereas they kind of buy their ice creams and then sit on the lawn.
It is on Janpath. It is directly on Janpath. You can see what's the vending area here. Parking is way to the left, as you can see. But I think I'd like to think about your idea about how, so it's at this spot. And I think what you're suggesting at the entrance and exit of the underpasses, Nikki, this is worth thinking about. Maybe we take a look at that.
We can look at it.
That's
our only apprehension was that currently also there are a lot of vendors in the main lawn area where this underpasses are designed just now, and they actually damage the entire landscape. So
but you'd have to create a paved area where they can.
Yes, agreed. But we didn't wanted any carts to go inside the landscape area. But I think it's worth thinking about it.
Yeah, we can figure out a way in which that can be.
Yeah.
There's also a whole row, right, between the parking and the side path on the canals. There's a whole row that the new path's been created. The green space there could be little pockets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rather than be, so then there's some programming along that edge, up and down,
Yes.
I agree with Jasleen to hide away the vending, which is what people come here for.
No, you're right. So that's worth thinking about. Let's look at alternatives for this, Nikki.
Now, I have another question. Just the view. It's a complex. What do you call it? Decision that you have taken regarding the trees, but many of the flowering trees seem more towards on the outer side. And now you are imposing or introducing trees which were not on this site earlier. So is that a better location to put the cretivias and the amaltas, that means that the benefit of those views are now largely for the, the buildings. which are coming behind. And
I'll answer that, Jasleen. You know, the flowering effects are typically shorter than the foliar effects. The foliar effects last longer. And basically one of the reasons why we suggested that we should change the monoculture of rye almonds was that my reading of the British choice of trees for Lutyens Delhi was that they believed that it was important to try and use evergreens everywhere. They also made mistakes about when they were identifying what was evergreen. But the evergreenness, I believe, is a mistake. That in fact, if you choose trees that are well adapted to Delhi's climate and Delhi's soil and Delhi's moisture regime, you will end up with deciduous trees that actually have this beautiful phase when they first come into new leaf in some part of the red, part of the red spectrum. So that's why we've done it. It's done almost like a correction to the way the British viewed, the British view of wanting evergreen trees in India. We're modifying that very consciously.
But you have the choice of, like, you're making this new grid, which is like a dominating grid now. And you can introduce some interesting trees so that at least once a year, maybe, you have an interesting, it's an interesting horticulture event. Like maybe, you can, since you are adding trees and changing, eventually, the present alignments are going, and
I'd be interested in whether you have any particular tree in mind, because we know when we've looked at trees that are adapted and that do really well in the Bangar soil and in these particular conditions, there aren't any flowering trees that I can think of that would actually make.
But India doesn't flower that prominently, and not for long either. Of course, it's very nice, and it's good that you.
Corecia does very well for many months. It flowers really
not
lovely.
Local to India.
What? Say it again, Aditya.
Corecia.
Corecia.
Corecia is an exotic tree from South America. We're avoiding exotic trees.
No exotics at all.
What about Calestemon gumenacalis?
Calestemon is also exotic, and it's in fact it's one of the eyesores planted all along the canals by the CPWT. It's one of the things we actually do, is in fact spoiled. Cassia Siamia, not a native tree. It's a comes from.
I think Savita has to go, so let's let her
can
jump
I
in
just
first.
I just have a question. I have to leave in 5 minutes.
I'm very happy to have a debate about this, but we do have to think of specific species, and then we have to weigh, how they behave and when they behave, and when they come into things like that. But I'm very happy to, to field suggestions and to offer you reasons of why I think that it's either a good tree or not a good tree.
Okay, thank you so much.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
If you can see the planting plan again. One comment for Jasleen was you certainly don't want flowering trees along the main avenue, because the whole solemnity and the whole dignity of that avenue will go if you have suddenly.
Not the avenue. I meant somewhere. I didn't mean the avenue.
No, never mind. Okay, I'll just finish. Now, it's a very elegant way that this has been done with the shivering, so to say, of the x-axis being moved around. I have just one question. The Pilkhan, not the Pilkhan, sorry, that is the Simal, Kem and Amalthas. It's almost forming a whole line of trees which are very discordant in height. They'll all be leafless at the same time. So maybe that could be given a second thought too, because that area almost gets treated like the back with the parking, and then you have these trees which are not really, the heights are different. Some of them will flower at the same time and have different colors. So I think that looks a little discordant to me. Maybe one could give it a second thought. One other question, if I can just finish. I also think that there is too much of hardscape happening at the India Gate. If somehow that could be toned down a bit. It seems to be very busy just now. Yeah, thank you.
Shall I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Savita's first question. Savita, if you look at the position of the outermost rows of trees, north and south, they're coming behind a wall, which is the boundary wall of these offices. So they're actually, in a sense, not part of the, the main avenue trees of Rajpath. They're almost, they serve the offices more than they serve Rajpath. Now, the reason we put the Semal there was because the Semal is emergent, it overtops everything else, it's much taller, and it comes into flower much earlier than everything else.
Keep it there. Yeah.
So to have one tall tree and then smaller trees on either side seemed to make sense to me. But I'd be interested to know what you think about that particular arrangement.
Sure, we can discuss it another time. I also feel that maybe Simal is a tree which, chokes up all filters, and it's really a very disruptive tree to have very close, especially to boundary walls as well, and is also for the building. So maybe that's another discussion we can have at some other time. It's just an observation.
In scale, these dots look very big, but it's actually that distance is considerable, huh? From the wall as well as from the building. Yeah, just making that clear.
Point is well taken. I think this is just the beginning of what the planting is going to be. So thank you for the suggestion, and we'll certainly look into that. But it's just the starting of how the planting will finally look like in this.
Sure.
We could also just look at the allergy created by trees.
Yeah. True.
Aditya, how long are we planning to go ahead?
We have a few more questions. I think Shishir wants to say something. I mean, we have another meeting. I'd like to finish it up in the next 4 or 5 minutes if possible. Okay. Shishir, you want to have a question?
I just wanted to thank Isola and Bimal's team for making this presentation possible for us to participate in and view and comment upon. And I have already, in the chat box, I already put my comments. It is not necessarily a question for specific site design. It is more of an approach, values kind of question. And I'm sure, and some of my colleagues have already mentioned about the trees, about the paving. I'm more interested in the larger ecological structure of the place and the footprints of the new buildings, the mini metro or whatever you call it, the train, and the impact of construction on and beyond the site. And I know it is not a question related to landscape design at this specific scale of the avenue at the Rajpath and along the canals. It is a much important question that as a project, I mean, as a site, that from the Ridge to Jamuna, what kind of impositions we are making, what kind of understanding we have about ecological structures, functions, and ecosystem services, that I think somehow, yes, somewhere it is must have been idea. I mean, these are my respected colleagues here, and whether and how it can be manifested directly, indirectly, explicitly, implicitly, the ecological story, the heritage, the human ecological story, and the heritage, the cultural heritage story, as well as the natural systems, natural history of the place. We have talked about the cultural history of the place, Luthians and whatnot, and since Luthians to now. But this is such a significant project, and it is not a Delhi project. It is India's project. And this is an opportunity for us to consider many tangible and intangible aspects at several scales. Yes, and that is why I put down that comment, whether and how the design team wants to consider, take it forward or not. I have a few other points related to some other disciplines that are related to landscape design, but I will not take time right now. But these are the questions, and I'm also open for further dialogue in future if there is an opportunity.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly respond to that, if I may, as somebody leading the design team on this. I understand this is not an issue regarding the landscape, the central portion, the colored area that we are showing just now. This is an issue you're raising regarding the project as a whole. I appreciate what you're saying. I wish there is another opportunity somewhere where we can discuss this. I think most of the issues that you have raised have good answers and good responses. I think there is but it needs to go into detail. I don't think that that any of the issues that you've raised, they have some responses that we can give to you, and with clear logic underpinning them. And so I hope there is an opportunity at some point, and we will do it. I'll let you know, Shishir, if an opportunity comes up, and let you know, so that we can have a discussion about this.
Thank you, Bimal, and thanks to your team for making a great presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll end with Ekta's question, and then I have one last closing comments, and then I'll request all the Delhi landscape architects to please stay with us for the next half an hour after this. Ekta, you have a question? Hello, Ekta?
Hi, good evening. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Bimal Patel, for a great presentation. Appreciate you taking the time and presenting to us. So I absolutely agreed with Jasleen that vending at just sporadic nodes is not enough. So please do consider, maybe multi-utility zones, much like we do in urban design, dotting the entire length of the Vista. And the second question is about bicycle lanes. I mean, the whole world is, encouraging an alternative mode in bicycles. I know you provided some token bicycle parking, but don't you think giving a substantial need for bicycle and encouraging that would be a great addition, especially because this is going to showcase to the rest of the country how we are headed in terms of sustainable ways to travel, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's an important issue, and Nikki, perhaps we can figure out what of the other pathways are ones that can be can take this into consideration. So let's just think that one through a little more carefully. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions from anyone else? Well, I'll just end by saying thank you, Mr. Patel. My summary of my kind of observation about this project is that it's a formalization of a space that's an informal space, and that's my real concern about it. Even from the renderings, it's becoming, I think the focus on it being an icon for this is, it's too much. The people are the icon. It's not being, the people are being forgotten in this space. That's my feeling about it. That the informality, the free spirit of this place, when everything is organized, it's too organized. India is not an organized place. And that's what we love about India, is that there's a sense of disorganization here. And so, that's the free spirit. People come here in a free spirit. So my question, I'm concerned, will the kids still be able to bathe in the ponds? I don't think so.
Why not? Why not?
It'll be so formalized and cleaned up. This place will become so formalized.
Does it have to be dirty for people to be able to swim?
They'll be shooed away, my friend. They'll be shooed away.
Well, that's something.
I hope we can ensure that those little kids can do there. The boating is still happening. People can still, the food, as we say, is not hidden on the sides, but the ice cream carts are still there. The balloon wallas are still there because they're right at the center. And that's the nice thing. So to take all the informality and push it to the sides and then leave the formal processional path, even the trees are being formalized. The rows of the trees are being formalized. We're going back to Lutyens, the British rule, the British saying, this is it. This is how we will rule this country in this formal manner. So I feel that the emphasis on the formality and the rigidity and the hardness is overdone. And so with that, I'll leave it. That's my personal thought. And if there's a way, even changing the bajri to a hardened material. So my feeling is, don't extend the Mughal gardens into this place. Don't please make it a real formal avenue. Let it have a free spirit and let India free spirit come through. And let it be that, please.
May I have the last word?
Absolutely.
I completely sympathize with what you're saying. I am an absolute Indian, and I love the vibrance and the spirit of the people here. I find nothing to romanticize about muck and dirt. And I find nothing to romanticize about the lack of facilities, which I feel is something that we are addressing. And I think that the spirit of the people of India will overcome any attempt to turn it into a overly managed place, much in the way that our people, when they are in London or in Singapore, manage to create a little India out of the most organized places. So I don't think your fears are that we need to worry that much about it. But yes, we have to always remain vigilant about that.
But the bridges, but the boating won't happen with the bridges, right? Because the bridges,
No,
the boating will be gone.
The area where the boating happens, that will remain. Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, the boating will remain. Of course, I'd encourage people to go jump. I would go jump myself in the hot summers of Delhi, but I'd like to do it in cleaner water than the kind there is.
Sure,
I don't think there's anything to romanticize about poor kids swimming in dirty water.
No, but I still want them to swim there.
Yeah, I agree with you.
No, one last thing
and
is,
the lack of the places to, lack of toilets is not something to romanticize about India.
No, I'm not saying you should not add toilets. You must add toilets.
And the lack of pathways where you can walk is also not something I think we should romanticize. So I think the spirit of India has to remain, and we, people of India anywhere in the world manage to make it remain, even in conditions of greater comfort, greater amenities, and a little more facilities. I think we will prevail.
Is there any possibility to let these Indian people cross the hexagon? It's impossible to cross the hexagon.
That is unfortunately not something that directly we can do, but that's an issue that we have brought up on a number of occasions. And
it's a major issue with this space. Yeah, you can't enter it. Pedestrians can't enter it.
Yes, that is I will sympathize with that point for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, is there anything else? Does anyone else want to say anything, or shall we wrap it up?
Thank you very much, Aditya, for giving us this opportunity to do this. And on behalf of the entire team, Shahir Associates, Pradeep, who is here, Dr. Rao, who is consulting with us from Bangalore, and our entire team. Thank you very much.
Maybe you guys can come back and tell us how our comments got incorporated, maybe in a month or two, if there's any, the eating areas and all that. That would be great.
We could do that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, please stay on. Say goodbye to our friends and please stay on, everyone. We just have another half an hour. Give us half an hour more, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Yogesh.
Thank you, Aditya. I'll have to take leave because I'm just going back to Delhi now.
Okay.
I will not be able to attend that AGM. Sorry for that.
Okay. Please, everyone else stay on. Thank you, Yogesh. So much.
Thank you, Aditya.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, guys, please stay on. We're going to move right into the general body meeting right now. We have an agenda. Can you please show that agenda on the screen, Sunetra and Shwetu?